Okay, here we go. Yay. So we can do anything we want at any time. However, we decided last week to do a pass through the Glory and Fall of Life book 2, Canto 3, because we did a slow pass through it last time and discussed it section by section. So it was suggested last week by all of us that we read through the entire canto and then go straight into the next canto and start doing a section, slower reading section by section. I'm always open though to if anyone has anything that is coming up for them to stop and discuss too. I'm super open for that. It's not my tendency, so I just say that because I'm super open to it, and I'm glad when it happens. But I almost never do it myself. Okay. Anyone else have anything to add before we do a meditation? Let's go the order on my screen with Marco, John Robert, Jeffrey, and then myself. Sound good? And start with 3. Can we do a little longer meditation? A 5-minute meditation? Good. You feel good about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Book 2, Canto 3, The Glory and the Fall of Life. An uneven, broad ascent now lured his feet. Answering a greater nature's troubled call, he crossed the limits of embodied mind and entered wide, obscure, disputed fields where all was doubt and change and nothing sure. A world of search and toil without repose. As one who meets the face of the unknown, a questioner with none to give reply, attracted to a problem never solved, always uncertain of the ground he trod, always drawn on to an inconstant goal. He traveled through a land peopled by doubts, in shifting confines on a quaking base. In front he saw a boundary ever unreached, and thought himself at each step nearer now. A far retreating horizon of mirage. A vagrancy was there that brooked no home, a journey of countless paths without a close. Nothing he found to satisfy his heart. A tireless wandering sought and could not cease. Their life is the manifest incalculable, a movement of unquiet seas, a long and venturous leap of spirit into space, a vexed disturbance in the eternal calm, an impulse and passion of the infinite. Assuming whatever shape her fancy wills, escaped from the restraint of settled forms, she has left the safety of the tried and known. Unshepherded by the fear that walks through time, undaunted by fate that dogs and chance that springs, she accepts disaster as a common risk, careless of suffering, heedless of sin and fall. She wrestles with danger and discovery in the unexplored expanses of the soul.
And only a long experiment, the hazard of a seeking ignorant force that tries all truths and finding none supreme moves on unsatisfied, unsure of its end. As saw some inner mind, so life was shaped. From thought to thought she passed, from phase to phase, tortured by her own powers, or proud and blessed. Now master of herself, now toy and slave. A huge inconsequence was her action's law, as if all possibility must be drained, and anguish and bliss were pastimes of the heart. In a gallop of thunder-hooved vicissitudes, she swept through the race fields of circumstance, or swaying, she tossed between her heights and deeps, uplifted or broken on time's inconstant wheel. Amid a tedious crawl of drab desires, she writhed, a worm mid worms in nature's mud. Then, Titan-statured, took all earth for food, ambition the seas for robe, for crown the stars, and shouting, strode from peak to giant peak, clamoring for worlds to conquer and to rule. Then, wantonly enamored of sorrow's face, she plunged into the anguish of the depths and, wallowing, clung to her own misery. In dolorous converse with her squandered self, she wrote the account of all that she had lost, or sat with grief as with an ancient friend. A romp of violent raptures soon was spent, or she lingered, tied to an inadequate joy, missing the turns of fate, missing life's goal. A scene was planned for all her numberless moods, where each could be the law and way of life, but none could offer a pure felicity. Only a flickering zest they left behind, or the fierce lust that brings a dead fatigue.
Amid her swift, untold variety, something remained dissatisfied. Ever the same and in the new, saw only a face of the old. For every hour repeated all the rest, and every change prolonged the same unease. A spirit of herself and aim unsure, tired soon of too much joy and happiness, she needs the spur of pleasure and of pain, and the native taste of suffering and unrest. She strains for an end that never can she win. A perverse savor haunts her thirsting lips, for the grief she weeps, which came from her own choice, for the pleasure yearns that racked with wounds her breast. Aspiring to heaven, she turns her steps towards hell. Chance she has chosen, and danger for playfellows. Fate's dreadful swing she has taken for cradle and seat. Yet pure and bright from the timeless was her birth. A lost world rapture lingers in her eyes. Her moods are faces of the infinite. Beauty and happiness are her native right, and endless bliss is her eternal home. This now revealed its antique face of joy, a sudden disclosure to the heart of grief, tempting it to endure and long and hope. Even in changing worlds bereft of peace, in an air racked with sorrow and with fear, and while his feet trod on a soil unsafe, he saw the image of a happier state. In an architecture of hieratic space, circling and mounting towards creation's tops, at a blue height which never was too high for warm communion between body and soul, as far as heaven, as near as thought and hope, glimmered the kingdom of a griefless life.
Above him, in a new celestial vault, other than the heavens beheld by mortal eyes, as on a fretted ceiling of the gods, an archipelago of laughter and fire, swam stars apart in a rippled sea of sky. Towered spirals, magic rings of vivid hue, and gleaming spheres of strange felicity floated through distance like a symbol world. On the trouble and the toil they could not share. On the unhappiness they could not aid. Impervious to life's suffering, struggle, grief, untarnished by its anger, gloom, and hate, unmoved, untouched, looked down great visioned plains, blissful forever in their timeless right. Absorbed in their own beauty and content, of their immortal gladness they live sure. Apart in their self-glory plunged, remote, burning, they swam in a vague lucent haze, an everlasting refuge of dream light, a nebula of the splendors of the gods made from the musings of eternity. Almost unbelievable by human faith, hardly they seemed the stuff of things that are, as through a magic television's glass, outlined to some magnifying inner eye, they shone like images thrown from a far scene, too high and glad for mortal lids to seize, but near and real to the longing heart, and to the body's passionate thought and sense are the hidden kingdoms of beatitude. In some close, unattained realm, which yet we feel, immune from the harsh clutch of death and time, escaping the search of sorrow and desire, in bright, enchanted, safe peripheries, forever wallowing in bliss they lie.
In dream and trance and muse before our eyes, across a subtle vision's inner field, wide rapturous landscapes fleeting from the sight, the figures of the perfect kingdom pass, and behind them leave a shining memories trail. Imagined scenes or great eternal worlds, dream caught or sensed, they touch our hearts with their depths, unreal seeming, yet more real than life, happier than happiness, truer than things true. If dreams these were or captured images, dreams truth made false earth's vain realities. In a swift eternal moment fixed there live, or ever recalled come back to longing eyes, calm heavens of imperishable light, illumined continents of violet peace, oceans and rivers of the mirth of God, and griefless countries under purple suns. This, once a star of bright remote idea, or imagination's comet trail of dream, took now a close shape of reality. The gulf between dream truth, earth-backed, was crossed. The wonder worlds of life were dreams no more. His vision made all they unveiled its own. Their scenes, their happenings met his eyes and heart, and smote them with pure loveliness and bliss. A breathless summit region drew his gaze, whose boundaries jutted into a sky of self and dipped towards a strange ethereal base. The quintessence glowed of life's supreme delight. On a spiritual and mysterious peak, only a miracle's high transfiguring line divided life from the formless infinite and sheltered time against eternity. Out of that formless stuff, time mints his shapes. The eternal's quiet holds the cosmic act. The protean images of the world force have drawn the strength to be, the will to last from a deep ocean of dynamic peace.
Is John Robert ready to go? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll try it. I'm on a hotspot, so you guys can tell me if it doesn't come through very well.
Hi, Andrea. We're at the top of 121. Welcome, welcome.
Inverting the spirit's apex towards life, she spends the plastic liberties of the one to cast in acts the dreams of her caprice. His wisdom's call steadies her careless feet. He props her dance upon a rigid base. His timeless, still immutability must standardize her creation's miracle. Out of the void's unseeing energies, inventing the scene of a concrete universe, by his thought, she has fixed its paces. In its blind acts, she sees by flashes of his all-knowing light. At her will, the inscrutable supermind leans down to guide her force that feels but cannot know. Its breath of power controls her restless seas, and life obeys the governing idea. At her will, led by a luminous impermanence, immanence, the hazardous experimenting mind pushes its way through obscure possibles mid chance formations of an unknowing world. Our human ignorance moves towards the truth that nescience may become omniscient. Transmuted instincts shape to divine thoughts. Thoughts house infallible immortal sight, and each a climb towards God's identity. The master of the world, self-made her slave, is the executor of her fantasies. She has canalized the seas of omnipotence. She is limited by her laws, the illimitable. The immortal bound himself to do her works. He labors at the tasks her ignorance sets, hidden in the cape of our mortality. The worlds, the forms her goddess fancy makes have lost their origin on unseen heights. Even severed, straying from their timeless source, even deformed, obscure, accursed and fallen, since even fall has its perverted joy, and nothing she leaves out that serves delight. These two can to the peaks revert, or here cut out the sentence of the spirit's fall, recover their forfeited to be.
Have you caught the place, Andrea? Are you with us? Yes? No? Top.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes,
You're with us, okay.
I got it. Yes, yes.
Do you want to squeeze into the rotation here? Is that okay?
Yeah, let me know when.
Yeah, after John Robert, before Jeffrey? Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, Jeffrey?
Yeah.
so I read now?
Yep.
Okay. At once, caught in an eternal vision sweet, he saw her pride and splendor of high-born zones and her regions crouching in the nether deeps. Above was a monarchy of unfallen self. Beneath was the gloomy trance of the abyss, an opposite pole or dim antipodes. There were vasts of the glory of life's absolutes. All laughed in a safe immortality and an eternal childhood of the soul, before darkness came and pain and grief were born, where all could dare to be themselves and one, and wisdom played in sinless innocence, with naked freedom in truth's happy sun. There were worlds of her laughter and dreadful irony. There were fields of her taste of toil and strife and tears. Her head lay on the breast of amorous death. Sleep imitated awhile extinction's peace. The light of God she has parted from his dark to test the savor of bare opposites. The light of God she has parted from his dark to test the savor of bare opposites. Here mingling in man's heart their tones and hues have woven his being's mutable design, his life a forward rippling stream in time, his nature's constant fixed mobility, his soul a moving picture's changeful film, his cosmos chaos of personality. The grand creatrix with her cryptic touch has turned to pathos and power being's self-dream, made a passion play of its fathomless mystery. Let me put my phone away.
But here were worlds lifted halfway to heaven. The veil was there, but not the shadowy wall. In forms not too remote from human grasp, some passion of the inviolate purity broke through, a ray of the original bliss. Heaven's joys might have been earth's if earth were pure. There could have reached our divinized sense and heart some natural felicity's bright extreme, some thrill of supernature's absolutes. All strengths could laugh and sport on earth's hard roads and never feel her cruel edge of pain. All love could play and nowhere nature's shame. But she has stabled her dreams in matter's courts, and still her doors are barred to things supreme. These worlds could feel God's breath visiting their tops. Some glimmer of the transcendent's hem was there. Across the white aeonic silences, immortal figures of embodied joy traversed wide spaces near to eternity's sleep. Pure mystic voices in beatitude's hush appeal to love's immaculate sweetnesses, calling his honey touch to thrill the worlds, his blissful hands to seize on nature's limbs, his sweet, intolerant might of union to take all beings into his Savior arms, drawing to his pity the rebel and the waif to force on them the happiness they refuse. A chant hymenial to the unseen divine, a flaming rhapsody of white desire lured an immortal music into the heart and woke the slumbering ear of ecstasy. A purer, fierier sense had there its home, a burning urge no earthly limbs can hold. One drew a large, unburdened, spacious breath, and the heart sped from beat to rapturous beat.
The voice of time sang of the immortal's joy, an inspiration and a lyric cry. The moments came with ecstasy on their wings. Beauty unimaginable moved heaven bare, absolved from the boundaries in the vasts of dream. The cry of the birds of wonder called from the skies to the deathless people of the shores of light. Creation leaped straight from the hands of God. Marvel and rapture wandered in the ways. Only to be was a supreme delight. Life was a happy laughter of the soul, and joy was king with love for minister. The spirit's luminousness was bodied there. Life's contraries were lovers or natural friends, and her extremes keen edges of harmony. Indulgence with a tender purity came and nursed the God on her maternal breast. There none was weak, so falsehood could not live. Ignorance was a thin shade protecting light, imagination, the free will of truth, pleasure, a candidate for heaven's fire. The intellect was beauty's worshiper, strength was the slave of calm spiritual law, power laid its head upon the breasts of bliss. There were summit glories inconceivable, autonomies of wisdom's still self-rule, and high dependencies of her virgin son, illumined theocracies of the seen soul, throned in the power of the transcendent ray. A vision of grandeurs, a dream of magnitudes, in sun-bright kingdoms moved with regal gait. Assemblies, crowded senates of the gods, life's puissances reigned on seats of marble will, high dominations and autocracies, and laureled strength and armed imperative mights. All objects there were were great and beautiful. All beings wore a royal stamp of power.
There sat the oligarchies of natural law. Proud, violent heads served one calm monarch brow. All the soul's postures donned divinity. There met the ardent mutual intimacies of mastery's joy and the joy of servitude, imposed by love on love's heart that obeys, and love's body held beneath a rapturous yoke. All was a game of meeting kinglinesses. For worship lifts the worshipper's bowed strength close to the God's pride, and bliss his soul adores. The ruler there is one with all he rules. To him who serves with a free, equal heart, obedience is his princely training's school, his nobility's coronet and privilege. His faith is a high nature's idiom, his service a spiritual sovereignty. There were realms where knowledge joined creative power in her high home and made her all his own. The grand illuminate seized her gleaming limbs and filled them with the passion of his ray, till all her body was its transparent house, and all her soul a counterpart of his soul. Apotheosized, transfigured by wisdom's touch, Her days became a luminous sacrifice, an immortal moth in happy and endless fire. She burned in his sweet, intolerable blaze. A captive life wedded her conqueror. In his wide sky, she built her world anew. She gave to mind's calm pace the motor's speed, to thinking a need to live what the soul saw, to living an impetus to know and see. His splendor grasped her, her puissance to him clung. She crowned the idea a king in purple robes, put her magic serpent scepter in thought's grip, made forms his inward vision's rhythmic shapes, and her acts the living body of his will.
A flaming thunder, a creator flash. His victor light rode on her deathless force. A centaur's mighty gallop bore the god. Life throned with mind, a double majesty. Worlds were there of a happiness great and grave, an action tinged with dream, laughter with thought. And passion there could wait for its desire until it heard the near approach of God. Worlds were there of a childlike mirth and joy, a carefree youthfulness of mind and heart, found in the body a heavenly instrument. It lit an aureate halo around desire and freed the deified animal in the limbs to divine gambols of love and beauty and bliss. On a radiant soil that gazed at heaven's smile, a swift love pulse stinted not nor stopped. It knew not how to tire. Happy were its tears. There, work was play, and play the only work. The tasks of heaven, a game of godlike might. A celestial bacchanal forever pure, unstayed by faintness as in mortal frames. Life was an eternity of rapture's moods. Age never came. Care never lined the face. Imposing on the safety of the stars, a race and laughter of immortal strengths. The nude God children in their playfields ran, smiting the winds with splendor and with speed. Of storm and sun they made ends, sported with the white mane of tossing seas, slew distance, trampled to death under their wheels, and wrestled in the arenas of their force. Imperious in their radiance like the suns, they kindled heaven with the glory of their limbs, flung like a divine largesse to the world.
A spell to force the heart to stark delight. They carried the pride and mastery of their charm as if life's banner on the roads of space. Ideas were luminous comrades of the soul. Mind played with speech, cast javelins of thought, but needed not these instruments toil to know. Knowledge was nature's pastime like the rest. Investitured with a fresh heart's bright ray, an early God instinct's child inheritors, an early God instinct's child inheritors, tenants of the perpetuity of time, still thrilling with the first creation's bliss, they steeped existence in their youth of soul. An exquisite and vehement tyranny, the strong compulsion of their will to joy, poured smiling streams of happiness through the world. There reigned a breath of high immune content, a fortunate gait of days in tranquil air, a flood of universal love and peace. A sovereignty of tireless sweetness lived like a song of pleasure on the lips of time. A large spontaneous order freed the will, a sudden frank winging of the soul to bliss, the breadth and greatness of the unfettered act, and the swift fire heart's golden liberty. There was no falsehood of soul severance. There came no crookedness of thought or word to rob creation of its native truth. All was sincerity and natural force. There freedom was sole rule and highest law. In a happy series climbed or plunged these worlds. In realms of curious beauty and surprise, in fields of grandeur and of Titan power, life played at ease with her immense desires. 1,000 Edens she could build nor pause. No bound was set to her greatness, and to her grace, and to her heavenly variety.
Awake with a cry and stir of numberless souls, arisen from the breast of some deep infinite, smiling like a newborn child, at love and hope, in her nature housing the immortal's power, in her bosom bearing the eternal will. No guide she needed but her luminous heart. No fall debased the godhead of her steps. No alien night had come to blind her eyes. There was no use for grudging ring or fence. Each act was a perfection and a joy. Abandoned to her rapid fancy's moods and the rich-colored riot of her mind, initiate of divine and mighty dreams, magician builder of unnumbered forms, exploring the measures of the rhythms of God, at will she wove her wizard wonder dance, a Dionysian goddess of delight, a bacchant of creative ecstasy. This world of bliss he saw and felt its call, but found no way to enter into its joy. Across the conscious gulf there was no bridge. A darker air encircled still his soul, tied to an image of unquiet life. In spite of yearning mind and longing sense, to a sad thought by gray experience formed, and a vision dimmed by care and sorrow and sleep, all this seemed only a bright, desirable dream, conceived in a longing distance by the heart of one who walks in the shadow of earth pain. Although he once had felt the Eternal's clasp, too near to suffering worlds his nature lived, and where he stood were entrances of night. Hardly, too close beset by the world's care, can the dense mold in which we have been made return sheer joy to joy, pure light to light. For its tormented will to think and live, first to a mingled pain and pleasure woke, and still it keeps the habit of its birth. A dire duality is our way to be.
In the crude beginnings of this mortal world, life was not nor mind's life was not nor mind's play nor heart's desire. In the crude beginnings of this mortal world, life was not nor mind's play nor heart's desire. When earth was built in the unconscious void, and nothing was save a material scene, identified with sea and sky and stone, her young gods yearned for the release of souls asleep in objects, vague, inanimate. In that desolate grandeur, in that beauty bare, in the deaf stillness, mid the unheeded sounds, heavy was the uncommunicated load of Godhead in a world that had no needs, for none was there to feel or to receive. This solid mass, which brooked no throb of sense, could not contain their vast creative urge. Immersed no more in matter's harmony, the spirit lost its statuesque repose. In the uncaring trance it groped for sight, passioned for the movements of a conscious heart, famishing for speech and thought and joy and love. In the dumb, insensitive wheeling day and night, hungered for the beat of yearning and response. The poised in conscience, shaken with a touch, the intuitive silence trembling with a name, they cried to life to invade the senseless mold, and in brute forms awake divinity. A voice was heard on the mute rolling globe, a murmur moaned in the unlistening void. A being seemed to breathe where once was none, something pent up in dead and sentient depths, denied conscious existence, lost to joy, turned as if one asleep since death dateless time, aware of its own buried reality, remembering its forgotten self and right, it yearned to know, to aspire, to enjoy, to live.
Life heard the call and left her native light. Overflowing from her bright, magnificent plain on the rigid coil and sprawl of mortal space. Here, too, the gracious, great-winged angel poured her splendor and her swiftness and her bliss, hoping to fill a fair new world with joy. As comes a goddess to a mortal's breast, and fills his days with her celestial clasp, she stooped to make her home in transient shapes. In matter's womb she cast the immortal's fire. In the unfeeling vast woke thought and hope, smote with her charm and beauty flesh and nerve, and forced delight on earth's insensible frame. Alive and clad with trees and herbs and flowers, earth's great brown body smiled towards the skies. Azure replied to azure in the sea's laugh. New sentient creatures filled the unseen depths. Life's glory and swiftness, life's glory and swiftness ran in the beauty of beasts. Man dared and thought and met with his soul the world. But while the magic breath was on its way, before her gifts could reach our prisoned hearts, a dark, ambiguous presence questioned all. The secret will that robes itself with night and offers to spirit the ordeal of flesh, imposed a mystic mask of death and pain. Interned now in the slow and suffering years, sojourns the winged and wonderful wayfarer, and can no more recall her happier state, but must obey the inert inconscience law, insensible foundation of a world in which blind limits are on beauty laid, and sorrow and joy as struggling comrades live. A dim and dreadful muteness fell on her. Abolished was her subtle, mighty spirit, and slain her boon of child god happiness, and all her glory into littleness turned, and all her sweetness into a maimed desire. To feed death with her works is here life's doom. So veiled was her immortality that she seemed, inflicting consciousness on unconscious things, an episode in an eternal death, a myth of a being that must forever cease. Such was the evil mystery of her change. End of Canto 3.
Canto 4, The Kingdoms of the Little Life. A quivering, trepidant, uncertain world, born from that dolorous meeting and eclipse, appeared in the emptiness where her feet, obscurity, a seeking stir. There was a writhing of half-conscious force, hardly awakened from the unconscious sleep, tied to an instinct-driven ignorance, to find itself and find its hold on things. Inheritor of poverty and loss, assailed by memories that fled when seized, haunted, forgotten, uplifting hope. It strove with a blindness as of groping hands to fill the and disastrous gap between earth pain and the bliss from which life fell. A world that ever seeks for something missed, hunts for the joy that earth has failed to keep. Too near to our gates, its unappeased unrest for peace to live on the inert solid globe. It has joined its hunger to the hunger of earth. It has given the law of craving to our lives. It has made our spirit's need a fathomless gulf. An influence entered mortal night and day. A shadow overcast the time-born race. In the troubled stream where leap a blind heart pulse, and the nerve beat of feeling wakes in sense, dividing matter's sleep from conscious mind, there strayed a call that knew not why it came. A power beyond Earth's scope has touched the earth. The repose that might have been can be no more. A formless yearning passions in man's heart. A cry is in his blood for happier things. Else could he roam on a free sunlit soil with the childlike, pain-forgetting mind of beasts, or live happy, unmoved, like flowers and trees.
The might that came upon the earth to bless has stayed on earth to suffer and aspire. The infant laugh that rang through time is hushed. Man's natural joy of life is overcast, and sorrow is his nurse of destiny. The animal's thoughtless joy is left behind. Care and reflection burden his daily walk. He has risen to greatness and to discontent. He is awake to the invisible. Insatiate seeker, he has all to learn. He has exhausted now life's surface acts. His being's hidden realms remain to explore. He becomes a mind. He becomes a spirit and self. In his fragile tenement he grows nature's lord. In him matter wakes from its long obscure trance. In him earth feels the Godhead drawing near. An eyeless power that sees no more its aim, a restless, hungry energy of will, life casts her seed in the body's indolent mold. It woke from happy torpor a blind force, compelling it to sense and seek and feel. In the enormous labor of the void, perturbing with her dreams the vast routine and dead roll of a slumbering universe, the mighty prisoner struggled for release. Alive with her yearning woke the inert self. In the heart she kindled a fire of passion and need. Amid the deep calm of inanimate things arose her great voice of toil and prayer and strife. A groping consciousness in a voiceless world, a guideless sense was given her for her road. Thought was withheld, and nothing now she knew, but all the unknown was hers to feel and clasp.
Obeying the push of unborn things towards birth, out of her seal of insentient life, she broke. In her substance of unthinking mute soul strength that cannot utter what its depth divine, awoke a blind necessity to know, The chain that bound her, she made her instrument. Instinct was hers, the chrysalis of truth, the effort and growth and striving nescience, inflicting on the body desire and hope, imposing on inconscious consciousness. She brought into matter's dull tenacity her anguished claim to her lost sovereign right, her tireless search, her vexed, uneasy heart, her wandering, unsure steps, her cry for change. Adorer of a joy without name, in her obscure cathedral of delight, to dim dwarf gods she offers secret rites. But vain, unending is the sacrifice. The priest and ignorant mage who only makes futile mutations in the altar's plan and casts blind hopes into a powerless flame. A burden of transient gains weighs down her steps, and hardly under that load can she advance. But the hours cry to her. She travels on, passing from thought to thought, from want to want. Her greatest progress is a deepened need. Matter dissatisfies. She turns to mind. She conquers earth, her field, then claims the heavens. Insensible, breaking the work she has done, the stumbling ages over her labor pass. But still no great transforming light came down, and no revealing rapture touched her fall. Only a glimmer sometimes splits mind's sky, justifying the ambiguous providence that makes of night a path to unknown dawns, or a dark clue to some diviner state.
In nescience began her mighty task. In ignorance, she pursues the unfinished work, for knowledge gropes, but meets not wisdom's face. Ascending slowly, with unconscious steps, a foundling of the gods, she wanders here like a child soul left near the gates of hell, fumbling through fog in search of paradise. I really loved the transition from the previous canto into this canto, like that emergence of the soul, and now the soul groping for early light, pushing out into the unknown.
I have a question, Matteo. Would you identify the soul with Savitri as the character in this poem?
Oh, wait a minute, in this canto, or what do you mean poem?
Well, in the poem as a whole, there's a character named Savitri who is going to have this encounter with death. And there are also these more, let's say, abstract principles or entities or ideas, like the soul is something we each have. And whereas Savitri is the more mythological aspect of that. Do you identify one with the other?
Tough question. Here's where, I don't want to get too complex. Here's where Sri Aurobindo really differentiated from Shankara, where Shankara looked out and saw many souls. And Sri Aurobindo says, no, one omnipresent reality, one soul, of which we're all partial, of which we're all seemingly partial cutouts of that. So on the storyline, no, the soul here is the emergence of Purusha, emergence of the infinite in the finite reality. Here, Savitri is in the omniscience, all the reality omnipresent. Savitri is that, with a capital T. But in the story, like, we're just staying really simple. In the story, this is Ashwapati is like sitting in the story. Ashwapati sitting in meditation, so, going through yogic tapasya, going through all of these like actually sensing back through time at the emergence of the soul, and when life was there's no mind yet, just life had just emerged from rock, from stable rock, into this really scattered and chaotic first glimpse of life coming into the manifestation. And Ashwapati in the story, he's sitting in meditation, going through all of this, experiencing all of this, connecting and one with all of this. And Savitri's not even born. Book 2, the Book of the Traveler of the Worlds, is Ashwapati doing yogic tapasya to reach the Divine Mother, which is the next book, 18 cantos ahead of where we are now, or something like that, 15 cantos ahead of where we are now, to reach to come into contact with the Divine Mother, to insist on the birth of Savitri. And that's the vision that Ashwapati has, and the boon that he's granted. I'm stealing words from Canto, right? Called the vision and the boon. And yeah, we're just we're in the little confines of the first emergence of life here. I hope that helps. Does that even answer your question?
I think so. I'm wondering if there's if what is being described is like the evolutionary kind of genesis of Savitri, who will come later. Is there some involutionary like aspect of, like, this is the soul aspect of the being who will later become and be represented as Savitri?
Yes, yeah, in the large way of things. Yeah, yeah. What, Andrea, John Robert?
Yeah, I always, or at least here, I also read it very personally, like this happens inside of ourselves. Like this line, a foundling of the gods, she wanders here like a child's soul left near the gates of hell. I go, yeah, yeah, that's how it all started. For me, it feels very vivid as a reality of my past. And then her greatest progress is a deepened need. That is an amazing line to me. Her greatest progress is a deepened need.
Where is that line?
That is page 134, about 2/3 down.
Thank you. I certainly love the way you're thinking, Marco.
Well, I would like to pick up on that greatest progress, because I noted that line as well, and it's it feels to me like verging on like a dark night territory, and this finding oneself like in through pain and unhappiness and anguish, and there's been this kind of prior experience or sense of a much more blissful, beautiful state that has been lost, and it's as if one awakens to some rude reality that then one must like emerge, like struggle one's way out of. But before one even can like orient towards like a reintegration of the blissfulness and a emergence out of darkness, there has to be some wanting to come out of it. And I think that that's what that deepened need is, that like in like the suffering of the mortal frame, it cultivates the longing to transcend. And until that longing is intense enough, like one will continue to go through the cycles of wanting, craving, desiring, grasping, getting what one wants, having it not be satisfying, and these endless cycles, which are described very vividly, like in the previous canto. These little kingdoms are, they're the world of I guess what would traditionally be called Maya or illusion in that kind of more narrow sense of that word. And this is, I think, where we find ourselves. Like this is our human starting point is around here. So I feel that it's interesting that we're reading these cantos now, as like our earthly being is being so like highlighted, like the fact of our earthly, or our earth boundedness is really being highlighted at this time with the coronavirus, and it's, I think, casting kind of into relief our individual struggles, and now like we're experiencing those in the context of a collective, like dark night kind of, I think, experience. So I find that, again, just to reiterate, I find this to be a really interesting section that we're reading, and this line about like our deepened need. Like in good times we don't so much feel like intense need. So if the need to change the world, the need for a better healthcare system, the need for better communication and sense of collaboration between people, like when you can cycle through the the desires and the satisfactions of life, and you can go to the store and buy what you need and order it on Amazon, or there's always entertainment, there's always something to do, people to see. When that's cut off, then we're thrown back to, like, I think this need for, we have to change things, we have to make something better, starts to arise, and then we look beyond the present. And so I think that that's part of what is happening here, and how it intersects with where we're at as humans and fellow travelers, and aspects of soul, like in this time and place now, how that interacts and intersects with this narrative that Aurobindo is providing us with. Just some thoughts.
In the next section, we stopped at the break. Sri Aurobindo often gives a summary of what went before, and I think the first two sentences of the next section speak to what he's doing here. In this slow ascension, he must follow her pace. He is Ashwapati. In this slow ascension, he must follow her pace. Her is life. Even from her faint and dim subconscious start. For so only can earth's last salvation come. For so only could he know the obscure cause of all that holds us and baffles God in the jail delivery of the imprisoned soul. So he's talking about the evolutionary appearance of life in matter, and then its ascension, slow, difficult, that it reminds us of our own struggles, and it actually is going on still in our being. And then he's also talking about the story, which is Ashwapati is searching for the cause of the human difficulties, and that's what he's doing in trance. He's looking for that. He took that task on.
Andrea, could you mute? There's some feedback on the line, and that might be it. I'm not sure.
So I also have a question. Just before her greatest progress is a deepened need, there are several lines. In her obscure cathedral of delight, to dim dwarf gods, she offers secret rites, but vain unending is the sacrifice. The priest, an ignorant mage, who only makes futile mutations in the altar's plan and casts blind hopes into a powerless flame. this, it's rare that you find negative imagery in Aurobindo, and this is fairly negative towards, it's almost like a kind of disdain almost, or a kind of a, feels like he's looking down and speaking in a way about, you know, people who have different ideas about things than him. It's almost like a, anyway, I'm maybe projecting, but I want help on this passage about what's going on there.
Mother had no patience with priests. She would look down from her room on the courtyard in the ashram, where many people were like in some kind of Holy Spirit, walking around and bustling around and making everything clean and laying flowers and burning incense and all of that. And she once said, those are the priests of tomorrow. And for Auroville, she said, there's only one thing, no religion in Auroville. There is a huge judgment, for lack of a better word, of that particular attitude in humanity, which looks like serving, but is also a power grab, either for the ego or for above others. Anyway, yeah, there's definitely no, we don't want that.
You're muted, Matthew.
I don't see it either of, I see it both. I see what both of you are talking about. My reading of those lines is that the early emergence doesn't have the power that exists when like if the priests, I see these priests here as like the early Vedic rishis, the early Vedic rishis, who the rishis 6,000 years ago were looking back through time, and the the amount of power that comes when mind comes in, and mind's not present here. Soul just emerged from life, so the flame's weak and the sacrifice is weak. And by sacrifice, I mean the ability to make sacred is weak. It's like the early flickering of these things. And I find these lines incredibly beautiful rather than a negative or a negation. It's just things are barely starting to churn here. Cast blind hopes into a powerless flame. It's like the early evolution must have been so obscure to life that was born, let alone early humans. I try to sense into my own sensings of evolutionary past when reading through this. This seems so early to me. This seems like 150,000 years ago. It just it seems ancient to me. And so I don't see this as an intellectual looking down. And I agree with what Andrea said also about the future of religion. Ironically, there's a lot of religiosity within the greater Sri Aurobindo community. It's there, and it's almost unavoidable, and it's needed until it's not needed anymore. Mother just simply had no need for it, neither did Sri Aurobindo. But that's not what I see here. I just see the super early emergence.
Yeah, thank you for that, Matteo. I appreciate that. I bring things very quickly into my present knowing and my present realm and the present realm of humanity. But I do want to say on that line, her greatest progress is a deepened need, that we wouldn't be here with Mother and Aurobindo if we hadn't awakened to this deepened need. Not everybody does. Many people are satisfied with a, what shall I say, earlier, maybe is the most gracious way to say it, with earlier forms of turning to the divine. And we wouldn't be here if we hadn't experienced that. That is, yeah.
That ties back in really nicely to what Marco was talking about earlier too, the desire.
Well, I'll think about it.
I do see a critique here. I see a critique of mythic religiosity, like the kind of magic mythic, the idea that by manipulating objects and performing activities that are like that can produce substantial change. And I mean, I think just reading these lines closely, it's a critique of like, it's blind hope into a powerless flame, so nothing's going to come of it. There's mutations in the altar's plan, so however it's laid out, the symmetry of it perhaps, or the objects that are there. I'm thinking of Jean Gebser as well, and the way that he describes structures of consciousness, and how when one structure erupts into being, it can overturn the truths and the what worked for the earlier structures. So while magic has power and it's foundational, it can fall into these deficient forms, which may just involve manipulation of objects, but don't actually participate in conscious power. And then when a stronger, a more complex, a more robust structure of consciousness comes, it's able to easily outstrip that. Because it has access to greater powers. In this case, say the mind, the mental, is able to abstract away from the symbolic representation and dwell on principles and dwell on ideas that encompass many, many different kinds of objects or rituals or religious kinds of activities. Like the abstract contains them. So, even though one ritual in one culture may be different than another, the abstract idea of both can describe some essence of what each one is attempting to accomplish. So I don't have an insider view into the Aurobindo world and the mother's, the culture around that. But I think part of what Aurobindo does is he tends more to the mental in his way of writing, and so there isn't as much of the the magic, and the animistic. It's there, but it's passed over, and it's seen from or contained within these higher concepts. That's my reading, just to try to weave a few more things together. I think it's I like that line too, the dim dwarf gods. It's something a little bit funny about a dwarf god, I think. A dim dwarf god. Dim could, of course, mean like not that intelligent, like at the same time as not that bright. It could refer, intellectually as well as in terms of just pure physical luminosity. So, yeah, just rambling reflections there. I think
it's a very Gnostic image, right? The dim dwarf gods.
How so?
Well, it's kind of the gods that that do things in a kind of transgressive way compared to the luminous God, if you like.
Ah, more like a trickster gods, or
Yeah, something like that. But anyway, I think your thoughts are useful to me, and help me figure out what's going on here. Yeah.
What comes to my mind when I read that line, the dim dwarf gods are some of the statues of the gods that I've seen in Indian villages. And they're, you know, some of them are really horrific. I mean, the actual the way the statue is formed. And Mother spoke about those gods as vital, gods of the vital. So precisely gods of this area of Savitri that we're going through now, which is the vital worlds. And we're just really starting here into these vital worlds. And some of it is really low and dark and mean, mischievous, intent on harm. Some of it is beautiful and high and adventuresome, and I mean, there's a whole range. And we're talking, Aurobindo here is talking about the early beginnings of life on Earth, where it hasn't developed very far. And he's using that imagery of obscure cathedral of delight to dim dwarf god, she offers secret rites. He's using that imagery to represent that, among many other images.
I also find this idea of a powerless flame very interesting, because in the readings that we're doing in the Secret of the Veda, flame is everywhere in his writings, or in the writings of the Vedas. And so this idea of a powerless flame is, I find, a kind of an interesting, you know, one tends to think of flame as always being powerful. So the idea of a powerless flame seems to me to say something important here.
Sri Aurobindo, throughout here, I'm sure you've noticed it, uses paradox. So he puts things together that don't seem to fit together to our minds. And he's actually mental. He's not coming from mental. He's using the mind, but to transmit something beyond. And that's why he keeps using these paradoxes to kind of blast our mind open or blast it out of the way.
Yeah, thank you, Bud. I agree. Yeah.
My sense of the powerless flame is also because he's describing the smallness of consciousness. They're attempting to reach that, but their whole consciousness is too small. And so they light small candles, as it were, you know, and are not aware of the larger flame of creation of the Godhead.
A teeny bit like Plato's story of the cave, the beings and the beings that are trapped in imprisoned in the cave.
That's a nice connection. Because in the cave there were flames that flickered, made the shadows, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the beings in the cave thought that the shadows that were thrown by the flame were the real world.
We could read on. The next section is quite short, actually.
Maybe we could all read one more time, ish.
Yeah.
And I would prefer to finish the call or my participation before the top of the hour. So that should give us enough time. I think you were in the middle, right, Matteo?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There are two small sections. So on page 137 starts a much longer one. So maybe we can read to the end of that break in 137. That is two sections.
Yeah, let's read the next section, and I'll split the next section with Marco, and then we'll maybe pause for another discussion if you want. How's that sound?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Good.
Yeah, that's fine.
Good, Marco? Yeah. In this slow ascension, he must follow her pace, even from her faint and dim subconscious start. So only can earth's last salvation come. There's the glimmerings of Savitri there. For so only could he know the obscure cause of all that holds us back and baffles God in the jail delivery of the imprisoned soul. Along swift paths of fall through dangerous gates, he chanced into a gray obscurity teeming with instincts from the mindless gulfs that pushed to wear a form and win a place. Life here was intimate with death and night, and ate death's food that she might breathe a while. She was their inmate, an adopted waif.
Accepting subconscious in dumb darkness's reign, a sojourner, she hoped not any more. There, far away from truth and luminous thought, he saw the original seat, the separate birth of the dethroned, deformed and suffering power. An unhappy face of falsity made true, a contradiction of our divine birth, indifferent to beauty and to light. Parading, she flaunted her animal disgrace, unhelped by camouflage, brutal and bare, an authentic image recognized and signed of her outcast force, exiled from heaven and hope, fallen, glorying in the vileness of her state, the grovel of a strength once half divine, the graceless squalor of her beast desires, the staring visage of her ignorance, the naked body of her poverty.
Here first she crawled out from her, where she had lain inconscient, rigid, mute. Its narrowness and torpor held her still. The darkness clung to her, uneffaced by light. There neared no touch redeeming from above. The upward look was alien to her sight. Forgotten the godhead of her walk, renounced was the glory and felicity, the adventure in the dangerous fields of time. Hardly she availed, wallowing, to bear and live.
a wide, unquiet mist of seeking space, a rayless region swallowed in vague swaths that seemed unnamed, unbodied, and unhoused, a swaddled, visionless, and formless mind asked for a body to translate its soul. Its prayer denied, it fumbled after thought. As yet not power to think, hardly to live, it opened into a weird and pygmy world where this unhappy magic had its source. On dim confines where life and matter meet, he wandered among things half seen, half guessed, pursued by ungrasped beginnings and lost ends. There life was born but died before it could live. There was no solid ground, no constant drift, only some flame of mindless will and power. Himself was dim to himself, half felt, obscure, as if in a struggle of the void to be. In strange domains where all was living sense, but mastering thought was not, nor cause nor rule, only a crude child heart cried for toys of bliss. Mind flickered, the disordered infant glow, and random, shapeless energies drove towards form, and took each wisp fire for a guiding sun.
This blindfold force could place no thinking step. Asking for light, she followed darkness' clue. An inconscient power groped towards consciousness. Matter smitten by matter glimmered to sense. Blind contacts, slow reactions beat out sparks of instinct from a cloaked subliminal bed. Sensations crowded, dumb substitutes for thought. Perception answered nature's wakened blows, but still was a mechanical response, a jerk, a leap, a start in nature's dream. And rude, unchastened impulses jostling ran heedless of every motion but their own, and, darkling, clashed with darker than themselves, free in a world of settled anarchy. The need to exist, the instinct to survive, engrossed the tense, precarious moment's will, and an unseeing desire felt out for food. The gusts of nature were the only law. Force wrestled with force, but no result remained. Only were achieved a nascent grasp and drive, and feelings and instincts knowing not their source. Sense pleasures and sense pangs, soon caught, soon lost, and the brute motion of unthinking lives. It was a vain, unnecessary world, whose will to be brought poor and sad results and meaningless suffering and a gray unease. Nothing seemed worth the labor to become.
I'd like to read that last line again. Whose will to be brought poor and sad results, and meaningless suffering and a gray unease. Nothing seemed worth the labor to become.
So that reprises some of the things that you were saying earlier about my questions. So Aurobindo comes up with the answers, right? Yeah.
of a sorry place to leave off. We're in a nihilistic pit.
Look, Marco, look at the next line.
Okay. Or so it seems.
And shines a solitary witness star that burns apart.
So Sri Aurobindo said that he would take the position of whatever, whatever thing he was describing, and describe it from the view not of the embodiment of higher consciousness, but of the way it was experienced there. And then he steps back, and that's what this next part is going to do for us, is judge not so his spirit's wakened eye. So he's going to give us now a different view of, but it's like they're both true.
Yes,
And we
like
have something to look
he
forward.
writes from a place of identity with what he is experiencing, that everything is a part of him.
Yeah, well said.
So we have something to look up for next time. Yeah. I'm always looking at the bright side of things.
I love your laugh, Jeffrey.
I'm glad we looked to the next line. I'm glad we're planting that seed of the alternate perspective on this nihilistic pit.
It all comes, Sri Aurobindo doesn't skip over anything. Really, nothing. Nothing is not described.
But we kind of need to have our noses in the shit right now, to tell you the truth. So.
A friend yesterday asked me, like, how are you doing? And I said, I'd be lying if I said I'm fine, but I'm fine. Yeah, there's something in the air right now.
Thank you for reminding Matteo. I lose track of time, and it's so early. It's the first of the month, and it never penetrated, and I didn't look at my calendar because there's nothing to do, right?
Okay, we all decided that a nudge text might be helpful.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love being with you all. Really, it's wonderful. It's a very rich experience for my heart and soul. Thank you.
I'm glad you made it.
Yeah, thank you.
And all of you.
Yes.
Lovely session.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Au revoir. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everybody.
You take care.
Nice to be with you.
Mm.